Good morning, everyone. I'm John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Business Council of Westchester. On behalf of Dr. Marsha Gordon, our President and CEO, and Jamie Schutzer, our Chair of our Board of Directors, we want to welcome everyone to our Political Leadership Series. This is a series that we created about 2 years ago, in which we wanted to make sure that our members and the business community at large would have an opportunity to hear from elected officials on all levels of government. We want to thank our sponsors for today's program: Burke Rehabilitation Hospital, Empire City Casino by MGM Resorts, Levitt First Insurance, Thale Industries, and White Plains Hospital. We are very excited at the Business Council of Westchester to have a robust advocacy program as the county's largest business membership organization that really does focus on economic development and advocacy. The Political Leadership Series is really part of the many different tools that we use to have the interface with our legislators. Some things that we want people to continue to know about: our 2023 legislative agenda is out. It's on our website if people want it. If people want hard copies, they can contact us and we'll get them to them. This is really our playbook for the year. It covers issues on the county, state, and federal level. It's going out to our guests this morning and every elected official in the county as well, and statewide elected officials. But it is a book that really comes from our members. Issues that their industries and sectors are facing, legislation that they support, legislation that they think would have a negative impact. We really want to make sure that we continue to be the eyes, ears, and voice for the business community in Westchester County. We also will continue to do our in-face advocacy work. So on May 16th, we will have our annual Albany Lobby Day. That's a full day event. We leave the Business Council of Westchester's office around 7:30 in the morning, get to Albany at 10. We'll have a series of meetings at a downtown hotel. Members of the Assembly delegation will be invited to speak to us in the morning of that day. We'll have a series of commissioners and other stakeholders, policymakers. A senior reporter from the Albany Press Corps will also be speaking. Then we'll go to the Capitol for a series of meetings with the governor's staff and the Senate Majority Leader and the Westchester Senate delegation. And then we end the day with cocktails and dinner, get back on the bus, and hopefully get back to Albany around 10 o'clock. So it's a long day, but it's also a day that really gives people a good understanding of what's happening in Albany. So that's on May 16th. That invitation will be out very soon. And then on June 1st, we will have our annual reception for the Board of Legislators. And that will be on June 1st. And again, look for that invitation as well. But today, I'm very pleased to be able to put this program together so that we can meet the new members of the Westchester State Legislative Delegation. Some of them are folks that we've been working with for many years in their other capacities. But it's very important that we have an opportunity to hear from them as they're really starting their careers in Senator Fernandez's case, a new body in the legislature, but for the other members coming from different branches of government. I remember when I was a freshman assembly member in 1990, it took me about 6 months to learn to get from my office in the LOB to the Capitol and to my hotel and back. So, and then also having to put a staff together and also balance the incredible amount of work you have to do in Albany as you're gearing up for the state budget, and also the constituent service that you all have to do back in the district offices. So we commend you for your commitment and your dedication. We're going to ask each member to speak for about 10 plus minutes to give us an overview of really, again, their first few months in their new positions, as well as we're 8 days away from when we should be passing the state budget, but what are some of the big issues that they are concentrating on? And then we'll open it up for questions that we'll ask people to put in the question box. So please use the Q&A box to put your questions in. We'll get to as many of them as possible. We're going to go in alphabetical order so that no one feels that we're taking sides or having favorites. But I'm going to do a short bio for each of them, and then I'll ask Senator Fernandez to kick it off. But Senator Fernandez is the New York State Senator who represents the Senate District 34, covering the Bronx and Westchester. She chairs the Senate Alcoholism and Substance Use Disorders Committee and works every day to help New Yorkers fight the opiate crisis. Senator Fernandez is a daughter of immigrants. Since childhood, she has had her love of her community and desire to serve As a New York State Assembly member for the 80th District, Natalia's passion and dedication to the Bronx helped make her the leader she is today. Assembly member Dana Levenberg, tireless energy and strong connections throughout the community and the region are the foundation for her continued success as a leader. Raised in Teaneck, New Jersey, Dana holds a BA from Brown University in International Relations. Her tenure as the Ossining Town Supervisor, she focused on building healthy communities and economically, environmentally, physically, and mentally, all through a lens of equality. Dana brings a positive can-do attitude to her work, along with an instinct for collaboration. She co-founded the Ossining Micro Fund, as well as the newly found Open Arms for Refugees, organized in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. She sits on the Corrections Committee, the Environmental Conservation Committee, the Housing Committee, the Libraries, Education and Technology, and Local Government Committee. Assemblymember Mary Jane Shimsky from the 92nd Assembly District includes most of the town of Greenburgh and Mount Pleasant and a portion of Northwest Yonkers in the county. In the Assembly, she serves on the committees on corporations, authorities, and commissions, local governments, real property taxation, tourism, parks and arts, and sports development, and transportation. From 2011 through 2022, she served in 6 elected terms on the Westchester County Board of Legislatures. Assemblymember Matt Slater from the 94th Assembly District, which encompasses part of Putnam and Westchester County, includes the towns of Somers, Yorktown, and as past Chief State of Staff for both Senator Murphy and the former town supervisor of the town of Yorktown. The Assembly member continues to hold focus and work to improve the state's opioid epidemic, build a better, stronger state economy, and support businesses and bolster law enforcement agencies. He's the ranker on the Government Ops Committee, the ranker on the Libraries and Education and Technology Committee, and he also serves on the Government Ops, Labor, Oversight, Analysis and Investigation, Real Property Taxation, and Transportation. So again, we are very excited to have these new members of the state legislature. We're lucky in Westchester County that we have such a strong line of communication with our members. That doesn't happen in other parts of the state. So I'm going to turn it over now to Senator Fernandez. Senator, thank you. Welcome to Westchester, because we know in the Assembly we didn't have Westchester, but we'd love to hear from you. And then when you're done, we'll then hear from Assemblymember Levenberg.
Thank you so much, John. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I am Natalia Fernandez, your new senator for the 34th, and maybe more so a welcome back to Westchester, because I love sharing this part about my life and the amazingness of representing District 34 that has the Bronx and Westchester, because I did grow up in Westchester for some time in my life. The Bronx has been home. It's where my family came from their respective countries. Family started there, family business started there, family is still there. But this family did move to Westchester at one point, and I'm a graduate of North Salem High School, class of '06. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to serve both communities and counties that I love and know. And it really has been an amazing entry. So thank you everyone for your warm welcomes, for your assistance and getting to know Pelham and New Rochelle. That is the areas that I represent for Westchester. And it has been great. But about who I am, the legislator that I am, yes, we're in the Senate now. We were in the Assembly. In the Assembly and continuing now into the Senate, I have given a great focus to mental health needs. So once upon a time, before I was ever in politics, I was a volunteer counselor for a Latina youth suicide, adolescent Latina anti-suicide program. So that has kind of stayed with me in my career in politics, making sure that we continue the conversation and reduce the stigma, because it can be uncomfortable when we talk about things like mental health ailments, as well as substance use disorder. And it has been an amazing journey so far. In the last 10 years, I've really seen the conversation become more normal, become more frequent. And touching to the governor's budget, I am very happy that she has seen the need and has dedicated $1 billion to mental health services in New York State. But with that said, we got to make sure that the money goes to the right places where it's needed. So that has been a lot of the work we've been doing in Albany since the year has started. Early in the year, I was appointed to be the chair of alcohol and substance use disorder. We changed the name because if those can remember, the committee and the office and the conversation has always called it substance abuse disorder or substance abuse. And we realized, again, words matter, words can hurt. And that title alone has hurt some people in even preventing them, stopping them from wanting to get the help and take that first step towards recovery. So changing the title of the committee, I think, was a small but a big deal, because it really shows that it's not so much abuse that someone is doing on them, but it's a disorder that they can't control. We know that addiction is a disease and it must be treated that way. So in the committee, we've been very active. We've had 2 meetings. We've passed 9 bills, mainly around trying to make sure that insurance coverage can help you get the services that you need. And we know that there's an overlap when it comes to substance use disorder and mental health. And those that are going to seek help at times have hit barriers. Okay, you said you have depression. Well, you can't come to this office. You got to go to that office. And it really delays the time that someone is able to start the recovery journey. So we're really trying to remove those barriers. In the budget so far, we've been, at least in the Senate, and I know the Assembly too, in their one house, we've been very adamant about getting an 8.5 COLA, the cost of living adjustment, because our direct care workers, our healthcare workers, home care workers, all of our medical providers, those that are incorrect behavior health clinics to doctor's office everywhere, are not getting paid enough. And we are at a workforce shortage, and it's at a really, really dire time right now. Coming out of the pandemic, we see less people in these workforces. So to increase the 8.5 COLA to give them a better pay, essentially, is going to be that support and encouragement that our healthcare workers need to stay in the field, to keep doing the good work that they're doing. And we really need to see that happen. The governor proposed 2.5, we want 8.5. So we're going to stand strong on that. As for myself, I've introduced legislation and passed legislation this year. What my first bill was regarding testing for air contaminants, knowing that some communities are right next to air pollutants, factories, power plants. We need to know how much that air is affecting, and that dirty air that's coming out of those smoke spouts is affecting the community right next door. So happy to see that bill pass, and be an advocate too for climate justice and making sure that we are taking proper steps to reverse what we've been doing. We're a society, a world, a country that has lived off fossil fuels and everything bad when it comes to production and moving forward, and we need to start changing it. But we need to do it in a pragmatic way that it's not taking people out of the workforce. You know, we know that our unions, our steam fitters, our bricklayers, everybody wants to be a part of the new green infrastructure workforce. So working towards that transition. As well, I have some bills related to domestic violence issues. The Bronx is the #1 county in New York City with the highest number of domestic violence cases. So it is very important to me, as the only woman senator of the Bronx, to address these issues. And we have introduced legislation to allow for virtual hearings with the victim and their abuser, to change the definition of consent, to ban intoxication as a defense against sexual assault, and to increase accessibility of outcry sexual assault cases. So a lot to keep doing. But when it comes more to the budget, I know the big topics is her housing compact. And I know my colleagues here will probably talk more. And we know that there's a housing crisis in this state. There's a lot of ideas to help alleviate it, but we really got to be cautious about the details. So in our one house budget, we did omit the governor's overall proposal to override local community zoning and upzone near transportation stations to help build more housing, more affordable housing. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but we got to make sure that we're not taking complete power away from our communities and being a part of the conversation as to where growth is going to happen and where we need to build. And as well, make sure that the communities itself are prepared to handle all this new infrastructure. I know that our sewers are terrible. I see the flooding all the time in New Rochelle, in the Bronx. It's really bad. So making sure that we're doing simultaneous efforts in upkeeping the infrastructure of a community, making sure that we got enough schools. It's very unfortunate in the Bronx. We've seen that Catholic schools have closed. We need to make sure that we are replenishing those schools with new schools, and making sure that we have amenities, that our hospitals can take care of the influx of people that we expect to come. So our safety net hospitals in the Bronx and all over the state, there was no investment by the governor in her original budget to protect and increase the Medicaid reimbursement. So we in the Senate and our one house did include that, and we will stay committed to making sure that we never have to fight for funding for our safety net hospitals. Every single year, as far as I've been in the Assembly, now moving to the Senate, every year we come to this battle. Oh, there's no money for our safety net hospitals. These are safety net hospitals. So we have to make sure that safety net is secure every single year. So we are very much committed to making sure that our hospitals have the support that they need, that the Medicaid reimbursement goes up so they can get more to help the patients, that our nurses and again, our healthcare workers are getting the protections of safe staffing, and as well as the COLA. Everyone's in agreement with this COLA, so I don't know how she didn't want to put more than 2.5 in her budget. But there is a lot of work to continue, and a lot can happen in 8 days. We just got to be vigilant and stay on the mission every single day that we're in Albany, and really make sure we get to that happy medium, because I believe that democracy is a compromise. We're going to have people with wants and views on this side of it and this side of it, extreme this way, extreme that way. We have to always get to a happy medium. So I'm committed to making sure that we can do everything that we can, getting the best outcome of what we decide. And in essence, always putting New Yorkers first and making sure that they can afford to stay in the state, in their neighborhoods, that they're getting good quality healthcare and education, and that they feel safe. So I look forward to working with my Westchester delegation. It's been really fun joining the meetings and catching up to the needs of every local community. And believe it or not, there's a lot of similarities, at least in the 34th. Which would make sense because common interest communities are put in districts. But there's a lot of similarities with the concerns in Westchester to the Bronx. And I think that we can really make a lot of change this year. So I'm incredibly excited to be in the Senate. It definitely is. And I'm not saying to my assembly members, move, because it's great in the assembly. Beautiful there. But it really has been a fun ride so far, and I love the outreach from my constituents. So my new constituents, if you're in New Rochelle or Pelham, the Pelhams, Pelham Manor, the village of Pelham, please reach out. Let me know what you want to see, what you want to know. I'm on social media. Honestly, that's like my business card. So shoot me a message on Instagram, and we can make sure that we bring your issues to the forefront. So thank you so much.
Senator, thank you. And we'll, as I said, we're going to take questions from folks if they put them in the Q&A box. We'll get to them after we hear from all of the other 3 members. We're now going to turn to Assembly Member Dana Levenberg. Assembly Member, how are you?
Good morning. Sorry about that. My little mouse was not working to unmute. I'm very good. Thanks so much, John, for and to the Business Council for welcoming us this morning. And I think I just say ditto to Senator Fernandez because I really feel like very much aligned with all of the points that she made. I'm probably not quite as fluent yet in throwing all the numbers around from the budget. I don't know, John, how you did your first year. I mean, you were just trying to find your way to the office. So maybe you were better at throwing the numbers around, but I actually know how to get to my office pretty well now, to the Capitol, but maybe I can't throw the numbers around as well.
They relied on good staff, that's for sure.
Yes, exactly. So Dunkin' Donuts cut through, very important to know about, right? And in any case, I have a lot of opinions about a variety of things, but I've really been spending a lot of time listening to so many of the groups that come up to meet with us on a regular basis in Albany and reach out via email, and just spending time making sure that our constituents are really being heard, as well as our business community. We set up mobile office hours so that we're spending time. My office is actually in Sandy Galiff's old office right now, which is at 2 Church Street in Ossining. And I don't know if in my bio you mentioned, but my district actually covers Briarcliff, Ossining, Croton, Cortland, Buchanan, Montrose, a little piece of Yorktown, the piece that Matt doesn't have, and then Peekskill, one little piece of Putnam County, which is the town of Phillipstown, including Cold Spring, Nelsonville, Phillipstown, and Garrison. And again, it's a longish district, probably not as big as Senator Fernandez, but I mean, definitely not as big, but definitely it's, right up along the Hudson. And as a result of being on the Hudson, along with my colleague, Mary Jane Shimsky, we have a lot of issues that are related to the Hudson being an economic driver in this area, certainly. And one of those is, as we're closing Indian Point, we have, I've been assigned to the Decommissioning Oversight Board, which I did actually participate in many of the meetings as a viewer before I was elected. And I've been involved in working Indian Point when it was operational and safety from the perspective of our constituents and our constituent communities since I worked for Sandy Galiff, also as her chief of staff for 7 out of the 8 years that I was with her. So, very important that right now during this decommissioning process, we're learning that Holtec, which is the decommissioning company that was hired by, or Entergy basically sold the plant to Holtec to decommission, that they're planning to discharge 1 million gallons of tritiated water into the Hudson. Now, over the course of time, this is how these plants have operated. But as we learn more about what we put into our natural resources, and as we learn more about climate change and health impacts of all of the various contaminants that go into our water, we have to, I think a little bit harder about if this is really the best thing to be doing for our communities. People fish, they recreate on the Hudson. 7 communities are actually get their drinking water from the Hudson. And knowing that Senator Harckham and I both introduced legislation that would disallow discharging radionuclides into the waterways of New York State. And, that I'd love to take some questions on that because I'm sure that you do have some. But we've been getting a tremendous amount of support across New York State about that legislation. I also had the privilege of passing my first bill, which was a chapter amendment to one that Assemblywoman Sandy Galiff had gotten passed last year, and that was to allow one-day marriage officiants to be certified through town clerks actually in New York State. And I'm very excited about that because that is actually something I also worked on with her many years ago when I was on her staff. So that was exciting, having my first bill passed. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, I'll let everybody else speak for themselves. In any case, that was great. And it's something that I think is just like common sense. People have been doing it for a long time, but the question about the legality of how people were doing it wasn't really clear. And I think it goes along with all of the good efforts that we've made. John, you mentioned that my focus has been, and my mantra has been, building healthy communities, environmentally healthy, economically healthy, physically and mentally, all through the lens of equity, which is a little bit different than equality, which is what you said. But really looking at equity issues has been a passion of mine since I was town supervisor in Ossining, and trying to figure out how we can, just as a state, as a community, as a region, do much, much better, making sure that people of color have more opportunities to get jobs, to start small businesses, to succeed, and to get paid fair wages. And again, thank you to Senator Fernandez for mentioning the 8.5% COLA. We really need to make sure that we have fair pay for home care workers. I think everybody has parents, grandparents that need that support, and our home healthcare workers, just really our home workers, have not at all gotten the money that they need, and they are really doing God's work. I think we can all agree to that, and we want to make sure that we can have people that we can actually hire. So I'm happy that 8.5% COLA is in our one house as well. I'm also committed to making sure that besides fair, that we have safe housing. And speaking a little bit about the housing compact, my personal belief is that we need to build a lot more housing, and I do believe that home rule and zoning is what has gotten us into a situation, and you've heard this from me before, that has sort of laid the groundwork for sprawl. But people are very, very committed to their single family homes and to their lot sizes, and more than anything, our local leaders, of which I was obviously one not too long ago, believe that they have a better understanding of what their localities can support from an infrastructure perspective, whether it's that there are wetlands, that there are train stations that maybe would not make sense to allow the increases that are part of that TOD housing, part of the housing compact for the transit-oriented development. I think that there are a lot of issues that are not perfectly worked out, although there is certainly flexibility built into the housing compact. And I do think that there is so much positive in there, but I think that we really need to work with our communities to make sure that it is realistic and that it is doable. And so, I'm committed to making sure that we do that from all sides. I do think that we are going to need, and I know that you probably don't like to hear this, but we are really going to need protections in place for renters to make sure that their rents aren't being jacked up, so that we're having yet another crisis of affordability within our buildings. And I know that, during the pandemic, obviously we had lots of crises that we were dealing with. But I mean, I personally, just talking to my own kids, I don't know how many people have kids that are living in apartments in the city, but they were in an apartment that they could afford, and that is going to end very soon, and they're going to have to find something that's much smaller. And I think that if they can find anything that they can afford, that versus coming back to live with mom and dad, that'll be a good thing. But I don't know how easy that's going to be for them. And I know that we're seeing rents jacked up through the ceiling, certainly in the city. And the point, we know that we need more supply, and we need to make sure that it's done in a way that is supportable. And to that point, I've been working also on making sure our roads are in much better shape. I know many of you know that 9A runs through my district, and it's, anybody know Yiddish? It's a shanda. It's really, really quite a shame that it is in such horrific shape. It's an embarrassment also. And it just really needs to be dealt with. We did get this $3 million for a study. Again, thanks to Senator Harcum and Assemblymember Galef, and I'm guessing that there were a couple of other folks who were involved in that. I think that Senator Elijah Raiklan Melnick also, and I know there are lots of people who are pushing for it, because we know that 9A cannot keep up with the traffic. It was certainly not designed to keep up with the traffic that it currently is sustaining. So we need a major, we're already in the throes of the study is actually starting. They think DOT thinks it'll take about 10 months, but I have met with DOT. I recently met with our county executive, George Latimer, along with Assemblymember Shimsky, because he is currently the co-chair of the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. And in my meeting with the DOT, I asked them, how is all of that federal infrastructure money going to come down to us? How are we getting some of it? And thanks, Marcia. In any case, so we the money is coming through is basically going to be allocated based on what are the capital projects that have been designated through the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council's Transportation Improvement Program. And so we need to make sure that Westchester is getting the projects in the TIP or on the capital plan, and that we're actually getting the money that we deserve here in Westchester, because we know that we have an incredible amount of traffic on our roads, and we're just not able to keep up. So I'm kind of coming at it at a variety of angles. There are lots of people writing letters also to the governor and to me, as well as Senator Harcum. I'm not sure if Assemblymember Slater and Assemblymember Shimsky are getting those letters too, and maybe Senator Fernandez, but we need to do better, make sure our roads are getting the money that they deserve and getting the improvements that they deserve. I don't know that we're going to be able to wait for the study to be complete to actually repave 9A in the places that it really needs to be repaved, but we really need to address it. This patching just ain't good enough at all. As far as the budget is concerned, again, I am still learning my way around, but I am happy that a lot, and I have to, give a shout out to Speaker Hasty. You guys don't really get to deal with him that much, but he really, really listens to the entire conference. And I know that he works across the aisle as well to come up with something that makes sense. And while I know that our friends across the aisle have pretty much stated that they're, not going to support the, and I don't believe that they voted yes for the one house. Many of them shouted out a lot that was in there that they really did like. And I know that we're certainly happy with the mental health support, and we're certainly happy with, that we're putting more money into infrastructure. We know we need more. We always need more and more and more. Of course, then we get back to the place where is that revenue coming from? And that's always the tricky part. And we do have a slight rate increase in income taxes on our wealthiest folks, 5 million and above, and it is a small increase. I'm sure nobody's happy about it, but nevertheless, we do want to make sure that we can support our entire state, and I think that is sort of a tiny. I'm sure it's not going to be tiny for most people in that category, or it won't feel that way. But I think that if we all chip in to make our state better and to make it sustainable and equitable, that we'll all be better off. So hopefully I think I addressed most of my main points. And if not, you'll ask me.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Shimsky.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to John and the Business Council. One of the things that really has to be done your first months in office, in addition to finding how to get to your office and your hotel and everything else, is you really have to start developing relationships. Because when you're trying to get at least 75 other people to agree on a piece of legislation you want, or you're trying to get dozens of people to agree to budget suggestions, you need to already know who people are. They need to know you. And one of the most important things in the initial months is to make sure that you all invest the time to get to know people, to talk to people, to go out to dinner with people, to go get lunch and coffee with people. Often involves food, but it's important that you get to know people, because then you know where to go when you have a question, when you have a problem. When you want a particular thing done, you know who your likely supporters are, and you can build out from there. And I know I have seen many of my colleagues at all different kinds of events interacting with their new colleagues and some of the other players in Albany. And that's really where you build the foundation on which you could advance your policy. During my time as a Westchester County legislator, my signature issue was infrastructure. Everything from dealing with our stormwater issues, as Senator Fernandez pointed out, our stormwater sewer system is just not built to handle the kind of rain we're getting these days as a result of climate change. We've got issues. I was at a press conference yesterday. Assemblyman Jacobson, who represents the Newburgh area, was urging the governor to accept a $50 million proposal to accelerate the rate of lead pipe replacement in the state. $50 million is so much better than nothing, but if we were just relying on this $50 million a year, it would take us over 70 years to replace all of the pipes. We can't, our children who are suffering from reduced IQ, a lot of scientists believe that many of the behavioral problems and the mental health problems we're seeing are at least contributed by lead in the drinking water. We have a long ways to go. I spent a lot of my time during budget season getting a $100 million ad for our local governments to improve their road systems. That made it into the Assembly One House. It remains to be seen if it's going to survive. $100 million a year, again, is better than the amount that we had previously in PAVE New York, but we still have a long way to go. And when we're trying to compete with other states and the rest of the world, we really do need to have transportation systems that work, power grids that work. We need to have healthy drinking water and wastewater systems. We need to be ready to be resilient to face the consequences of climate change, which are already hitting us. People in the state have already died because of climate change. And what we have to do is we have to move forward. All of this is going to take massive investments, but those investments are going to pay off in the long run. And that's why we're going to need to, as a state, make sure we do more. We're trying our best to make sure the MTA, which is very important to Westchester County, is properly funded and their infrastructure is upgraded the way it needs to be. But our roads and everything else needs to be upgraded too. And I'm proud to be joining the folks who are leading the charge on that, because that's something that I know a lot about and I care passionately about. And I know that all of the other good things we want cannot happen if we don't have that solid physical platform on which to create them. One of the other great things in this budget, in addition to the aid to the MTA, is the aid to higher education. If you want to maintain a robust economy these days, you really need a strong higher education system. And SUNY and CUNY have been underfunded for some time. And I hope that our leaders will be able to save most of what's in the one houses to make sure that SUNY and CUNY can continue to be the great institutions they are, and that they can attract people outside. Now, when we talk about people leaving the state, the number one issue is housing affordability. There was a study that came out a couple months ago. I can try to find it so you can all circulate it, on what states are great for raising a family. New York kind of finished in the middle, but in all of the subject areas, New York finished very high, except for one: housing affordability. That is why my son is not here. That is why a lot of people's children aren't here. And we really need to do more on that. We need to look at, if not good cause eviction, some of the principles behind good cause eviction. Because if you force people to move to less and less desirable housing year after year, you are not only degrading them and their families, you are also degrading communities. You are destabilizing communities if people have to move every year. We need to make sure that people can actually put down roots in their neighborhoods. And we know the housing availability crisis in the state is not just about low and moderate income people. You can have a six-figure salary in this state and have a hard time finding appropriate housing for yourself and your family. There's a long way we have to go. There are many different issues and sub-issues we have to deal with on it. But we are starting to get to work on that in the legislature, and we do need to move forward. Which brings us to the housing compact. We do need more housing, but the transit-oriented development, for example, has no affordability requirement on it. In many of our communities, especially Hastings and Dobbs Ferry are just two examples I know very well, our most affordable housing are in the areas where developers would be allowed to tear down and put more dense housing in. Where are those people supposed to go? And once that gets torn down and the buildings get torn up, is the housing going to be as affordable or more affordable as what was there? Probably not. If we are talking about building more housing, we need to consider the income groups, the occupational groups, the support staff in business owners' offices need to have places to live. And one of the problems in trying to attract more business, people talk about taxes. And yes, we need to control taxes. But one of the other things is they cannot find staff, because the kind of staff they want to hire at reasonable salaries can't afford to live around here. We have to deal with this problem, but we have to deal it in a way that's going to solve this problem and is not going to give us a whole lot of quote unquote market rate housing that the vast majority of our people cannot afford. I'd just like to go back for a moment. My first bill was a chapter amendment, making sure that nightlife entertainment places that attract a lot of young people have staff, supplies of naloxone, and are ready to fight opioid and drug overdoses. This is extremely important now that we know that fentanyl is turning up in all kinds of recreational drugs. It's turning up in punch bowls and parties. By the way, tell your kids never to drink out of a punch bowl in a party, because what is in there at this point could kill them. But what I wanted to say is it's so important that the places where young people are, which includes our nightlife, are trained to fight opioid addiction and are trained to deal with drug overdoses so our young people can survive being young people. I was very proud to sponsor to get that bill passed. This continues some of the work I did on the Board of Legislators, which included authorizing the first authorization of a lawsuit against the opioid industry for all of the harm they cause to our people and our governments here in Westchester. I have no idea how long I talked. I have a feeling it's time to stop. I just want to say my favorite cut through in the Capitol is taking advantage of the fantastic Gothic Revival architecture and cutting through those beautiful faux Byzantine archways. It really cuts down on the steps, and it really is an inspiration as I go to work every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Shimsky, and I couldn't agree more. When we take people up to Albany for our annual day and we take them through the Capitol, some of them for the first time, you can just see their mouths just drop at the beautiful architecture in that wonderful building. Assemblymember Slater, thank you for being here, and we'd love to hear from you.
Well, good morning, John, and I want to thank you, Marcia and Amanda, for putting this together. Always great to be with the Business Council of Westchester. For those who don't know, I am Assemblyman Matt Slater from the 94th District, Northern Westchester, Yorktown, Somers, and 80% of Putnam County. My first job out of college was actually in the state assembly, so it's full circle for me now to serve as a member, and it's something that I take great pride in doing. And I really have enjoyed my first few months as a member. I have to say, one of the great things that I have found is the camaraderie with all the members, Republicans and Democrats, from the North Country down to New York City. It's been really fantastic, as Mary Jane said, building relationships with everybody that we get to meet, and I've enjoyed it immensely. The Westchester delegation in particular has been fantastic. Great to work with. We find commonalities in a lot of things. Do we agree on everything? No, and that's okay. And I think that's something that we need to, embrace more often, especially on other levels of government. In regards to the budget, because I want to just be brief so we can get to some questions. In regards to the budget, I've been focused on the transportation side. I am on the transportation committee. Region 8 has the most assets in the state, and yet we have the worst rated roads in the state. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. It's a failure, I think, and we need to fix it. And so one of the things that we're working on right now with actually Assemblyman Burdick, a couple of things. Number one, Assemblyman Burdick is working on a study of Route 35 corridor, which is the east-west corridor here in Northern Westchester. But secondly, I think we can go to a formula-based approach when it comes to funding our DOT regions. And again, looking at the number of assets and the high level of ridership that we have here in Region 8, it would directly benefit our Hudson Valley region if we can go to that type of formula-based funding. Because when you go talk to DOT Region 8, Lance McMillan, who's fantastic, they'll fix every road that they can, but they just need the dollars. And then the question becomes, well, how do you drive more dollars to our region? And I think that could be a possible answer. I was previously supervisor of the town of Yorktown. And one of the things that I saw in the budget that I think we should recognize is the flat chips funding. It is flat from last year. If you talk to our highway superintendents, they actually have to, with the cost of construction, they're paving 25% less for the same amount of money. And the budget doesn't reflect the increase caused by the inflation and construction costs that they're facing. And we know that local roads are really important. So chips, extreme winter recovery, I think it's important that we see an increase in that funding, and hopefully we can see that reflected in the final budget. The other thing that I've been focused on budgetarily is the FMAP dollars. That's something that the governor proposed. I do want to applaud my colleagues in both the Senate and the Assembly. One house, this was something that they rejected, but the governor wanted to sweep about $635 million, which the federal government gives us to support the counties when it comes to implementing Medicaid programs. And she proposed sweeping $635 million of that. And if you pay attention to what the Association of Counties from New York State is saying, that's going to result in one of two things. It's either going to result in cutting Medicaid services, which is our safety net, or it's going to result in an increase in property taxes, and it's an estimate of 7 to 14%, depending on where you live and what county you live in. Neither one of those, I think, are acceptable. And so that's something that we've been focused on. I've been focused on. I've actually partnered with Congressman Lawler, Congressman Molinaro, to introduce legislation that would prevent the governor from taking that action. But again, thank you to my colleagues in the Assembly and Senate for rejecting that in the one house. Quickly, just a few other things budgetarily that I think is important to note. I again want to applaud my colleagues for rejecting the governor's proposal to increase the MTA payroll tax. I think we all know, especially from the business community, what a killer that is. A tax on jobs doesn't create a job. And I think it's important that we finally understand that. And so I do want to thank again, my colleagues for rejecting that. I am looking at the streaming tax. If you like Ted Lasso like I do, watched the second episode last night. The Ted Lasso tax is an interesting one. It's an 8% sales tax on streaming services. And I think that when you look at the affordability crisis that we're facing as a state, and there was a study just last week, again, showing that we're the worst state to retire to because of the high cost of living. I think it's important that we find other ways to offset the expenses that we continue to see. And fact of the matter is, state spending's increased $60 billion over the last 5 years. And that's I think a real cause for concern. And I think it's something that we need to recognize and figure out ways to be a little bit more fiscally responsible from a budgetary standpoint. I am the ranker on libraries. And so when it comes to investments from the state side, I think important, obviously, public education, critical, but also our libraries. Our libraries are obviously really important educational, but also cultural hubs in every community. And our libraries actually just last December testified that they needed $1 billion in construction aid to modernize their facilities. And the governor actually went backwards in that. So again, I want to applaud my colleagues in the Assembly and the Senate for rejecting her budget cuts to our libraries and actually increasing. The Assembly increased the amount of construction aid, not to the $1 billion mark. We have to get there, I think, over a multi-year approach. But at least it's a step in the right direction. And again, libraries, I think, are just critical components of our community. But and I just say this about housing. I wholly reject the governor's housing compact and TOD proposal. As a town supervisor and working directly with the Business Council of Westchester, we actually passed zoning upgrades to specific parts of our community, which encourage multifamily and mixed use developments. So we know how to do it and we know where to do it. But I think Albany and the state government needs to do is figure out ways to help support local governments when they're doing that. What does that mean? Again, it means dollars. The governor proposed $250 million statewide for infrastructure improvements. So when you're talking about things like sewer, water, road improvements to support this type of housing, $250 million doesn't even come close to covering the cost. And there's also planning costs associated with these zoning upgrades and housing proposals that municipalities take on. So I do think that the Assembly proposal and the Senate proposal is a much better approach than what the governor had originally proposed. This was something, again, that, working with the Westchester delegation, I think their proposal and the Senate's proposal is a much better one than the governor. And again, that's just working in a bipartisan fashion, bringing different experiences and perspectives to the table and having a comprehensive conversation about it. And so I do applaud, again, my colleagues for rejecting the governor's proposal and coming up with a better focus and a better path to address the housing issue. And again, I don't think anyone's going to deny the fact, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, that there is a housing shortage and we have to diversify our housing stock. I agree 100%. It's just a matter of how do you do it. And I think the governor's proposal was a disaster. And I want to thank everyone, especially my colleagues here, for rejecting it and coming up with, I think, a better approach. And so, John, I don't want to take up too much time because I know we want to get to Q&A. But thank you again for welcoming me, as always. And it's always great to be here with the Business Council of Westchester.
Thank you, Assemblymember Slater, and thank you all for your comments. And we do want to get to a few questions. We know we're getting close to the 10 o'clock hour, but we're going to try to get a few in. And this is open to anybody who answers them. But one thing I will say, as I said at the earlier outset, our legislative agenda from the Business Council of Westchester, which is led by George Lentz, who is our chair of our Government Action Council, many of the things that we talk about are what we're hearing from our business. It's mid-size, small, non-for-profits, larger corporations. All of them still looking to rebound from the pandemic, all of them having challenges to find talent and recruit and retain that talent. So as you're going through not just the next 8 days or however long the budget cycle is going to take, but as you go through this, the end of this session, there are some critical things that as you're discussing them, please understand the impact that it could have on businesses. Everything from the unemployment insurance issue that our unemployment insurance trust fund is bankrupt and our businesses are feeling that every month. We need to do what 39 other states have done over the last 2 years, which is to give some relief to businesses by replenishing that fund. Minimum wage. In a perfect world, we could do what most of your colleagues would like to do, but we're not in that perfect world. And I'm just going to read one little quote from one of our board members, Cindy Delfino, who has been a champion in the not-for-profit community. But she said new minimum wage increases will negatively impact nonprofits, which will then impact the children and families we serve. So again, those are the type of unintended consequences that I think we have to think about when we're dealing with these issues. And finally, the energy landscape. The energy landscape for Westchester County does have an important role as we look to recruit and retain businesses. We need to show that we have a strong grid. And the CLCPA plan, in which we all would love to see happen at the right time, have put dates in that we know we're not ready for. We have not built that renewable infrastructure yet in Westchester County. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to get a lot of communities on board to stop us, to stop protesting and stop using SECRA as a way of delaying these things. So the Business Council of Westchester has always supported renewable energy as our future, but we need to have an honest conversation on how we're going to get there. So those are just some of the things that are in our agenda that we hope you will look at. The housing issue, you all have raised it. You all have given your thoughts. And whether you didn't support the governor's rollout of the plan, I think all of us can agree that we do need more housing in Westchester County. So with all of the different issues that you have raised today, and as you are all starting your careers in the state legislature and are hopefully going to be a breath of fresh air in some cases for folks that just say no and then move on to the next issue, how do we come together to come up with an affordable housing plan that is going to work in Westchester County and get communities who sometimes automatically say no to become more flexible in that area?
John, I'm happy to jump in on that. I mean, if I could, 2 weeks ago, I was in North Castle at a roundtable with local officials, Republicans and Democrats from Westchester and Rockland and Putnam, and they will provide the answers to those questions if you just ask them. And I think what the governor did was very short-sighted because she proposed something without even having a conversation with local officials. And if you talk to our local officials, they'll talk to you about, again, infrastructure needs, sewer. Mary Jane talked about runoff. I mean, our water system needs improvements. In the town of Yorktown alone, and again, I go back to the $250 million that she originally proposed. We have a sewer project that we've been trying to get done for 30 years. The cost is $20 million at this point. And so 20 million, that's just one community. If you go up to Carmel, we have a similar situation. Southeast and Brewster, another situation. We can eat up that $250 million in sewer enhancements and improvements alone, not even beginning to touch on road infrastructure. But I think the answer is actually having local officials to come together and identify how the state can invest necessary dollars to help them get across the finish line when it comes to diversifying their housing stock. And again, I go back to what we did in Yorktown. You were there, John. Business Council was a great partner in this. When we upgraded our zoning, it was the first time that we did a significant zoning upgrade in 30 years. But there was a significant cost associated with that just on the planning side. And so getting the state or some funding apparatus to help support municipalities to do their traffic studies, to do their impact on school districts, so you understand the impact of housing on schools, all of those will help encourage municipalities to take these steps to improve their zoning, to modernize their zoning, and then welcome in new projects. That's just my personal opinion, and I, obviously want to hear from my other colleagues as well.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Mary Jane?
Okay, a lot of what Matt said really rings true. For example, the planning process, if you as a community are just beginning looking at certain things, is certainly very, very important. And that I believe the Assembly One House does have incentive funding to help with the planning process for these for changing zoning and allowing a greater diversity of housing therein. The infrastructure piece is very important. The governor's original proposal put in $250 million for the whole state to help with infrastructure needs. Now, if you look at the sewer problem in Mount Vernon alone, that is way more than $250 million. I know that we put more in our one house. I believe the Senate might have done the same. I'm not really sure. But we need to be serious about infrastructure investments. The other thing we have to do, and one of the great things about seeing the Westchester Municipal Officials Association, WMOA, for example, come together on this, is having regional discussions. Because when you're talking about an infrastructure that can welcome more housing and so on, a lot of these problems don't end at municipal borders. I don't think there's really a legal place for the county to play a role, but the county has the biggest planning department in the area. And they are someone who might be able to help bring people together. Now, I think you really do have two types of communities. There are communities that have been trying and have had some success in increasing their housing stock. And they basically, what they need is encouragement to try to do more. They need a certain level of understanding if they can point to what they're filled with reservoirs, they've got steep slopes or so on that make further development that much more difficult. You do have certain communities in Westchester and certainly in other parts of the state that have been dragging their heels on this issue. And at some point, something's going to have to be done. But I think the real problem with the governor's proposal is it was a one size fits all. It lumped everybody, every community in the same boat. And not only is that unfair, not only can that destroy the quality of life in communities who have really striven to create that balance, but it's also ultimately going to be ineffective. So if we can work with communities, who they are and where they are, and give help with the resources, I think we can do much better.
Senator Fernandez or Assemblymember Levenberg, do you want to weigh in on this, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, I agree with so much of what Matt and Mary Jane said. And I think, you know, more than anything, we can't have this one size fits all. Thalia, can you maybe mute? Because it seems like it's bouncing through you. Thanks. In any case, it's, you know, we can't have one size fits all. We have to actually look. One of the things I overheard a couple of my colleagues, well, I was actually in a discussion with my colleagues, kind of a little bit of a debate, and I definitely lean a little bit more towards the governor than many would like me to, because I do think that we just have to move faster on this more than anything. But I think what, you know, I'm hearing from my colleagues is like, we haven't even given the carrots a chance. So, you know, let's give the carrots a chance. And then if we have to come in with a stick, but, you know, there's not, I mean, there is absolutely a phase-in approach in the compact. There's absolutely time, but there is no doubt that there is not enough money for planning. And so many small communities need help with that planning more than anything else. I think it would be really interesting. I mean, I do think, you know, we've seen a lot of communities who've been done like the master building plan or whatever it was called in New Rochelle. That was really interesting. And, you know, shout out to Matt for doing, you know, a lot of work. I know that, I think Pound Ridge has done a lot of work, a lot of other, or maybe it's Pelham. I'm thinking of Pelham. Hastings, you know, there are a lot of communities that are trying, and I would say leadership 100% is in the place that they want to see more housing built. But I don't know that this is making anybody feel good about actually getting the job done. I would say that it would be really interesting to hear from developers how they can help with some of these infrastructure problems. You know, I remember driving through my old, you know, towards like Teaneck, New Jersey, where I grew up, along Route 4 and seen all of this housing that popped up over not so many years. And I asked somebody, like, what did you guys do about schools? You know, and they said, well, the developers built the schools. You know, and I've always said, like, we need to be getting more, you know, output from developers for these issues. Like, we need help with the capital projects for the schools. Like, if we could actually see some of that money coming through, you know, through the planning process from the developers, maybe we could get somewhere, because, you know, everybody's talking about not having infrastructure, not having this. And I don't think anybody wants to see a giveaway to developers. I do think we absolutely need more affordability as part of the plan. You know, I say more affordability. I don't think that it's just quote unquote affordable. I think it's affordable at different levels of affordability. So workforce housing, et cetera. I just don't think that we're going to get that far with the housing compact. I could be wrong, because there's been so much pushback from the local municipalities, but I do think it would be great to have them at that table. And I know the governor did come and meet with municipalities, or she met with some of our local groups, I think, not too long ago. But you know, she does need to have be listening to what it is exactly that the specific issues are, so that they can be addressed. Because I think the whole idea of this one size fits all, like, we're just going to put out a percentage and expect everybody to get there, you know, is going to be a challenge to actually make it work. And I want it to work. So I want to make sure that we can actually get there. So I have to run, you guys. I'm so sorry, but thanks so much again for the opportunity. And please, I'm happy to follow up with answers to any other additional questions. I know there's a bunch in the chat and in the Q&A.
Thank you very much. And before we get to Senator Fernandez, I just want to let folks know that the Business Council of Westchester, we're very happy over the fact that we have some of the largest developers in Westchester County that have really made a commitment to the county and have built some incredible projects. We met with all of you a few weeks ago, our Westchester delegation. And at that meeting, we did give you some suggestions, and we put that in writing. But in our legislative agenda, just getting to the point about school districts, which seems to be one of the issues, we've called for the creation of a fund for school districts to offset the influx of public school children who might attend those schools as a result of the new projects. And this can be limited to apartments that are 3 bedrooms and up to encourage family housing. So there are some creative ideas that we can do. Senator Fernandez, I didn't want to cut you off if you wanted to add anything on the housing piece. And then we have one more question that I'll get to, and I'll let everybody get on with their day.
Thank you. Yeah, really quick. Everyone did kind of touch upon what I wanted to say, and you did too, about giving us actual words in writing of suggestions. And that's what I asked for. And I did bring that form to leadership to see if that can be implemented in this plan, because yes, I do think it was very broad and one size doesn't fit all. And we really have to see how different parts of the state can reach this goal. So thank you for that document, because literally they asked us, well, what language do you want? So give me the language so I can, bring it to the conversation.
And we'll keep giving you that input that we get from our developers, because they do play such an important role, and have played such an important role in the county. We have a whole slew of questions. What we're going to do is this, because the legislators have a busy day. This is their one day back in the district before they go back up to Albany. We're going to send these questions that we don't have asked to all of you, and then you and your staffs can get back to the folks. That would be great. But here's just one other question on healthcare. Can any of you give us an update on the 340B carve-out proposal? The negative impact on hospitals, health centers, and patients struggling with addiction and AIDS will be huge if this program is not continued moving forward. Does anybody have any intel on that? Senator Fernandez?
Yeah, so I've been in the work groups under the health umbrella, given my committee and everything related, and there is great support to keep that in there. Senator Rivera does have a bill that has been seen as, again, the compromise, the happy medium. But that is so important, because these medications, these services are needed by so many in our state, and to just not have it there is a real detriment. So we are pushing hard. I believe the Assembly did do so as well in their one house, but there is great support to see that go through. And we have gotten good feedback that, okay, we're trying to work it in. But that will be determined and seen in the next 8 days.
Great. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank the 4 of you for being here today. I think for those of you who attended today, the one thing that I hope you leave from hearing from these 4 electeds is their passion and their commitment and their enthusiasm to serve. As a former elected official, I think we don't give enough credit to people who really actually want to stand up and make a huge sacrifice to their families, to be away from them for weeks on end. I always used to tell my family during this time of the year with the budget, I can't tell you when I'm coming home. So get used to that. But the fact is, we are very fortunate, as I said, in Westchester County, to have these new legislators serving in the Assembly and the Senate. And at the Business Council of Westchester, we look forward to continuing to have an open dialogue. We can agree to disagree on issues, but as some of you have already said today, we do have a level of respect, and with the fact that we all are in this for the same reason, which is to improve the quality of life for all residents of Westchester County. So again, thank the four of you for your service. We look forward to watching you in your new roles, and we'll see you in Albany on May 16th at our annual lobby day for the BCW. I want to thank again our sponsors, Burke Rehabilitation Hospital, Empire City Casino by MGM Resorts, Levitt First Insurance, Thale Industries, and White Plains Hospital for their ongoing support. On behalf again of Marcia Gordon, our president and CEO, and Jamie Schutzer, our president, chair of our board, and George Lentz, the chair of our Government Action Council. Thank you all for watching today. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.